All right. I'm going to be talking about creativity in the classroom, and before I start, I'm going to give you guys a little activity to do. It's just a 2-minute activity. And so what I want you to do with the people at your table is you're going to discuss, you're going to pretend that you are the person or people in charge of determining whether we are going to have a 2-hour delay, get out of school, or come regular hours for a snow event. But you're going to have to do it from the perspective of what I give you on this card, okay? So, you know what? Since you guys are faithful and you came first thing in the morning, I'm going to let you choose which you want. Do you want to choose blindly, or do you want me to tell you what they are and choose?
Blindly.
Blindly? Okay. All right. Let's see. Pick a card. Whoops. All right. You got what? Let's see. A persistent telemarketer and the person who stays on the phone just to annoy them. That's your persona that you're going to discuss. So you become those characters to discuss whether or not you're going to have a delay. All right, and you guys.
All
right.
Because of your extended warranty.
You get a dedicated Waffle House employee and their favorite faithful customer. All right. Do you want to do one? Oh, look, there's Miss Davis, or Dr. Davis coming in. You guys will be a police officer and the most wanted criminal he or she just arrested. Would you like to join Dr. Stinson for a moment for this first part? Or would you like to change yours?
Oh, okay, I got you.
What are we doing?
Okay. All right. So you're going to assume the persona of the characters that you're given, and you're going to discuss whether or not there should be a 2-hour delay, we come to school regular time, or we're out of school for snow. You have 2 minutes. Assume the role of your people and begin.
Customer and the employee as the person who gets us.
So do we want to be out by 2 hour delay?
You're discussing this. You're determining that. So you have to assume that role and discuss that. Yes. 2-hour delay, out of school, or come to school regular.
Serving waffles and hash browns.
Yeah.
Whatever you like. Here 24 hours a day.
I'm thinking from a public safety standpoint.
Yes, I like that. Snow day, more time. You can come anytime you want. You don't even
Give
have
me
to get
safer
out.
sound than that jail cell.
Better business.
And we're canceling school. We're talking about school, or we're talking about all
We're talking about
operations.
school.
Okay.
We're talking about school.
You know, we have the department.
Well, we got the same.
Thinking.
Do we have
I can see some
a
aggression here. Like, you're a mostly criminal. Like, you need to be like,
like you don't even need to say this.
That's true.
I mean,
That's you.
I'm in the waffle.
Yeah.
I can't. How long can you do it? I can't even be outside in the cold.
2 hour delay, cancellation.
like the road smothered and
Go.
covered.
Safe first.
Crazy on my half browns. And nothing else would have done. So I think I was the Waffle House.
Yeah.
The rest of the people.
You know, we
Yeah.
hear you, hear what
I
you're
wish I had
saying.
it on my, for it. It was.
And I think we're gonna be okay, and we're gonna be, and the kids, you know, they'll resolve. And
All right, you got about 24 seconds to come up with a decision.
Yeah.
unless you're not available.
I started seeing the
But I can transfer you to.
Exactly.
Yeah, I saw.
Plus you have an extended warranty.
All right, time's up. I'll take your cards back. Okay, so this is just an example of how you could do a quick warm up, or at the end of the class, if you have a couple minutes that you are wanting to kind of wrap things up, where you can even let the kids choose what their characters are, and the idea is that they're just kind of thinking outside the box, they're whatever. Some kids will buy into it fully, some won't, and that's okay. You're only spending a couple minutes. It's not a waste of time. Will some kids get silly? Yes, and that's okay, because you're not wasting a ton of time. So it's just a way that you can just kind of add things in, and you can do things, so many things, from asking kids to like assume a certain persona, to make a certain, like, to discuss something or whatever. All right, so why is creativity important? Not only can it increase learning, but it can also enhance motivation and joy. So when you bring creativity into the classroom, there's so much more that you're bringing in for the students beyond just learning, okay? So we're going to go through some myths. I've chosen 10 myths, and I'm going to tell you the myth, and then I'm going to debunk these myths, okay? The first is creative lessons automatically allow students to be creative. So as a teacher, you go in and you organize all this stuff, and you cut it, you print it, you do all the things, and you have all this creative stuff. So does it automatically create a creative environment? And the answer to that is no. Because if the student is not the one thinking creatively, then it's actually not a creative lesson. So it shouldn't be all the teacher doing all the creative thought, it's the student. It's okay to put your creative thought, obviously, but it needs to be the student thinking creatively. Myth number 2, giving students time to be creative takes too much valuable class time. So it does take some time. Not always. Sometimes you can just alter something you're already doing, but sometimes it does take time. But it's not a waste of time. Creativity allows students to become critical thinkers, problem solvers, innovative thinkers, and invested in their learning. Sometimes they have more buy-in if they get to create something. So if I'm going to do a big project and I'm going to ask students to, like, for example, one of them that I do is in my honors class, I have the students design a roller coaster, and it's with certain specifications, but they create it, they create a backdrop, they design it, they give it a name, they do all this stuff, and they color it, and they get really involved in it. I laminate it, I put it on the wall, they love it. Then I have them do certain calculations with it. They have to find the velocity at certain points, the total mechanical energy, the potential kinetic energy. But the thing is that once they've created that, first of all, they have more buy-in. Second of all, I know that I'm about to ask them to do something very rigorous. So by allowing them to start off with something that is kind of more low-key, more relaxed, it gives them that buy-in. Plus, I figure if they're going to talk about things outside of school at home, and they may not, I get that, but if they're going to, they're not going to go home and say, guess what I got to do? I got to calculate the velocity of my roller coaster. They're going to say, oh my goodness, I designed the coolest roller coaster. And then hopefully that would open up that discussion. And I know that they don't always talk about school outside of school, but if they do, it's probably going to be something they enjoy doing that they're going to talk about. Myth number 3, creativity and rigor cannot be directly proportional. Sometimes it's not going to be. So I'm going to jump to the second one. Sometimes it's not going to add rigor, and that's okay. It is okay for it to not always add rigor. Sometimes it's okay for them just to create because they are thinking and they're developing other skills. But learning activities designed to foster creativity cast students in the roles of problem solvers and communicators rather than passive acquirers of information. Creativity is not in competition with school achievement. When creativity is effectively employed, academic achievement can be enhanced and rigor is often achieved. And I do have the reference that I got those quotes from. This is a really great book, and I have the reference at the end. It's a really great book about how to add creativity into the classroom and why it's so important. But you can definitely add rigor when you add the creativity. Myth number 4, imposing rules restricts creative thought, okay? Sometimes people are like, hey, it's open-ended, but, and you give it to the kids, and the kids just sit there. They don't always know what to do with something open-ended. A lot of us don't. But if I said to you, I want you to write a poem, okay? Or I want you to write a song, or whatever. I want you to write a story. Sometimes you sit there because where do you start? But if I said, I want you to write a poem in this style. I want you to write a story about this. I want you to pretend you are your favorite character in your book and now write a story, whatever. So if I give you just some rules, okay, or if I give you restrictions, you have 10 minutes to write. Okay, you're going to write this, but you have these rules. It's okay to give those rules because that allows them to explore, and it actually helps them and guides them through that. And then also they're able to come up with innovative solutions that fit within that. And let's be honest, most of the time in jobs that you're doing, you're going to have certain rules. We need you to create a solution to this problem. And so it just helps them kind of do that. And it also gives them those guidelines and helps them have structure and focus. All right, myth 5, creative people lack discipline. Okay, we all know some creative people who seem kind of off the wall, they seem chaotic, and so you assume they lack discipline. But that's actually the opposite. Yes, their thought processes can be chaotic, and sometimes they can seem all over the place. However, most creative people are actually highly disciplined. They're usually eager to study and strengthen their foundations, which enables them to showcase their skills in more impactful ways. They are dedicated to their craft. They want to learn, they want to develop. And so, so it's not going to be a lack of discipline. Myth number 6, giving ideas to students is cheating and undermines the development of original thought. I have had struggles in the past with this where I thought, when I taught elementary, I did teach ELA as well. I taught all the subjects, and sometimes it was hard when a kid would bring me a story and I don't know what to do next. And I always felt like if I gave them like some kind of hint of what to do, then I'm cheating or I'm taking away their creative thought. But you're actually not. And that's okay to do that. Obviously, you don't give them the whole thing. You don't map it all out. But when a kid is stuck or they need something, then if you just give them some little push or some little suggestion, they can run with it. You're not robbing them of their creative thought by doing that.
Hey, Coach.
Yes.
Along those lines, when Jesse and Lawrence and I co-taught together, one of the things we like to do, when we first started, we would make these exemplars for our performance task. And we found that students inevitably end up copying the exemplar. Like, this is what right looks like, so we're just gonna do that. So what we started doing was, instead of teaming up together, we would plug into different groups. And we would never we would kind of suggest things and that kind of thing, but we would never feed them ideas. But being in the group with them to kind of like stimulate conversation, we found like kids had some crazy thoughts, really creative thinkers, you know, just with a little prodding, you know.
Oh yeah, when my kids do Rube Goldberg machines, some of them get stuck. Sometimes they have this thought going and they get stuck, or they have something that's actually the opposite, where there's not really much creativity there. It's pretty, and if I go over and say, hey, what if you did this? What if you tried to accomplish this? Then it gives them something, I didn't think about that, but then they're the ones that have to come up with that solution. So I'm not, you know, sometimes you think I can't help them or it's not theirs, but it is theirs. And sometimes they need that spark to ignite the creativity. And it also kind of gives them permission to like break the rules, so to speak. If I say, what if? And they're like, whoa, I can do that? You will let me do that? Because sometimes they just think I have to do it, you know, this way. And sometimes that becomes such a catalyst for this profound creative, you know, thought. And so, but yeah, it does help to kind of pop into those conversations when they're in small groups, just to hang out and listen and just kind of prod them and then walk away and let them go with that. All right, myth 7, truly creative students exhibit creativity in all subjects. I know there's times where, like when I'm testing students for gifted, which is, creativity does go hand in hand with gifted, but creativity is not limited to gifted students by any means. But I know sometimes when I'm testing and I'm like, man, this kid is so creative. Or the opposite, this kid does not qualify for creativity, and I may have a teacher go, really? They don't qualify in that area? They're so creative. The thing is that my test that I have to give only tests certain things. And that kid may not exhibit it. A kid who is super creative musically may come into my science classroom and I don't see that. Okay, or a kid who is very creative for me may not be creative in ELA. I know that you know, Kelsey and I will talk sometimes, and it's interesting to see, because she's ELA and I'm science, how kids it's totally different sometimes what you see. So a couple things happens here. The creativity looks different in different subjects. It takes on different forms. And a student who excels in one area may not excel ever in another area creatively, but it could be that it has to be brought out a different way. It could be that they're slower to show that creativity in that area because there's different types of thinking, such as conceptual, critical, and analytical. And so it involves different types of creativity, and they have to process it differently. So, so just know that you're going to see it different in different subjects. Myth 8, creativity is an innate talent that cannot be taught. Sometimes it's like, man, this kid is not creative, or these kids are just not creative this year. And I've had, when you do the same assignment or a variation of the same assignment each year, and some years you're like, oh, this, I know there's one that I love to do. I have my students, they're actually working on it right now in my honors class. They research a nuclear disaster, and then they then present a newscast, but they're doing it in present day. So like as if the disaster just happened. But part of what they have to do is they have to use facts to say things like, this is what we think might happen in the future, but they do it based off of the facts that actually happened. And so they have to kind of think outside the box of, how do I present this? How do I do a newscast? And I know a couple years ago, I had a group of kids that just took off with it, and they just, I mean, they created commercials in the background. There was the the scrolling thing across the bottom of the screen where it was, I mean, they were just so creative with what they did. And so then the next year you just assume it's going to happen the same way, and it didn't quite do that. And that's okay. Like sometimes it's not about these kids can't do it, they just sometimes don't know. And so like I've found that I have to say to them, hey guys, if you want to make commercials, you can. It just so happened I had one group that just kind of ran with that, and I noticed that kids don't just naturally always do that. Sometimes you have to say, hey, you might want to create commercials. You might want to create a background that like keys in. You might want to watch a news broadcast to see what those look like. So sometimes we have to kind of push them and help them develop that, and have them, you know, think outside the box. But those things can be taught. And the biggest thing is that the openness to experience is the most crucial personality trait for creativity. So if they're open to experience, that goes for me too. If as a teacher, I am open to experiencing something with them, and if they're open to it, then that's going to be what brings that out. So if I'm open to just trying it, like I'm going to try this, like what the little warm-up we did, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. For some kids, they're going to sit there and they have no clue. They can't, it's not going to happen. It might be that I have to model that for them to show them what that looks like. And it could be I model it and that just doesn't work. But don't get discouraged if you try something and it doesn't work. Also, what doesn't work for one class may work for another class. And you're gonna have kids that don't connect every time, and that's okay. It's no different than anything else. We have kids that don't connect. There's always someone who doesn't connect with something we do, but that doesn't mean we quit doing it. If we know that it's valuable, then we keep doing it. Sometimes they have buy-in eventually. Sometimes they don't, but the hope is that they have buy-in with something else we try. And so, but when they're open to exploring the new processes, then we can nurture those skills, and we can cultivate and develop those skills. And we can practice those.
Another thing, I'm sorry to keep
No, you're
cutting
good.
here. This is good. One of the impediments to creativity a lot of time, and you're talking about teachers failing in trying to inspire or motivate creative thought. One of the biggest impediments to creativity, especially like among gifted students, is the fear of failure, right? They're afraid to try something, and gifted kids a lot of times are afraid to fail, so they get paralyzed by perfectionism, that kind of thing. So I can't remember who it was. I think it was Mark Wilson or one of those. He does a TED Talk, but at some point he said something about celebrating failure, not for its own sake, not celebrating failure for its own sake, but celebrating the attempts. And he would make this failure wall of fame. Like, and I think Rube Goldberg is a great example of that, right? Like, you failed totally, but you were spectacular in the failure. You know, so encouraging kids when they're doing creativity, that perfection is not the standard, and even sometimes even like correctness is not the standard. It's the process, and you dabbling in creativity can make you a much more critical thinker down the road. But throw caution to the wind, fail. And fail spectacularally if you do, you know.
Oh,
so,
yeah. And that's
saying it's the journey, not the
Yeah,
destination.
it's the journey,
well,
not the
and
destination.
I tell my kids, that's one of the things I love about science, and I think I've shared this in here before, is that science is all about failure.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, if you think about it, you know, there's so many failures before there's an accomplishment. And I was like, some people spend their whole lives trying to accomplish this goal of curing cancer or whatever it is, and they die not being successful in what they were pursuing. However, when something doesn't work, that is a discovery. That is something that you have discovered. This didn't work. That's a discovery. That's important to know. And so it's helpful for them to realize it's okay to fail. And even like with Rube Goldberg, when I'm scoring them, I don't score them, were you fully successful in your end result? I score them, and I don't tell the kid, and I tell them that in the beginning. I encourage them all along, but they don't hear that. They just, you know, they still hear, I gotta succeed. And it's fun on that last day when those kids have really worked, you know, for 3 straight days, 4 days, however many days we do it. When they get to that last day and they still haven't accomplished it, and I look at them and I'm like, look, this is your grade. And their grade is 100 or 98 or whatever their grade is. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yes, because here's what you did. You every day came in, you did a little bit better than the day before, and you kept trying, and you kept working through this, and you've got another kid, a group that might have been fully successful, and their grade may not be as good because there was not any innovative thinking there. So it depends on what your parameters are, but for them to see that I can still be successful even in failure because I kept trying, I kept going at this, and that's what's important. And you're right, it's just about feeling safe to fail. It's about feeling safe to try something different. And so feeling safe to just explore who we are and how we think, because sometimes what we do creatively is a combination of all the things that we're pouring into ourselves, and it comes out differently. And so, yes. Myth 9, feedback should not be given because it can inhibit creativity. So you got this kid, they turned something in, and it's beautiful, but it didn't align with what your expectations were, and you were so scared of, well, I don't want to they need feedback. Okay, feedback is super important. Constructive feedback, obviously, but it allows them to experience creative growth. So if they say, I would never forget. So I started writing when I was really, really young. 3rd grade, I remember writing. And so beyond that, it was just something that I always loved to do. I went to summer programs for writing, and it was something I just loved to do. And just creative writing, I entered competitions, I wrote plays, I wrote stories, I've written a book, and I loved it. And I will never forget, my senior AP English teacher gave me back my first assignment, and I had a C on it. And I looked at her and I was like, what? And it wasn't that I thought I was like, yes, I was that one that strived, I wanted the perfection, but every teacher before that had just said, good job, this is amazing. And that's all I'd ever heard. I never had constructive feedback because what I did was good, but was it great? And she looked at me and she said, listen, this is where you can improve here and here. And I was like, and it was just, I thrived in that. And I grew exponentially in that year because for the first time I had a teacher who gave me constructive feedback, who allowed me to express myself and to grow but she critiqued me in a way that wanted me to grow and to be better. And so that was such a blessing for me because I was able to develop. So don't be afraid to give that constructive feedback. If you do it correctly and if you do it in a sensitive way, depending on the child, we all know depends on how they can receive that, but they can grow. It helps them develop their ideas, it helps them learn from their mistakes, and it helps them improve their skills. So it's so important to give that constructive feedback. And then myth number 10, it's impossible to incorporate creativity into the classroom for my content area. So that is absolutely untrue. So on each of the slides, I have given some ideas for different subjects. And if you are struggling for ideas, you can go into ChatGPT. I'm not a huge AI person, but there are things that if you go and say, how can I add creativity into my French lesson? Or how can I add creativity into this lesson? So sometimes it can kind of give you ideas. You might not even use what they have, but you're like, same thing. It's the exact same thing that we are saying that we need to do for students is sometimes we need something to spark that because it's hard. We get kind of stuck, and so it kind of helps us think outside the box. There's a lot on science because I'm going to skip the first one. It was the roller coaster one I gave. One of my favorite ones when I taught 6th grade, Alfred Wegener was the one who came up with the theory of continental drift, and everybody laughed at him and mocked him. And there's even a song about it. Love the song. Look it up sometime. Just Alfred Wegener song, and you'll find it on YouTube. It's really cute. And I would play that for my kids. And then I asked them to write, because then afterwards, after he's gone, long gone, they're like, you know what? We think he was right. Okay, we think this was an absolute possibility. And so I asked them to write an apology letter to Alfred Wegener for mocking him for his theory of continental drift. And so what it does is it lets them take this perspective of this apology letter, but it allows them to, you can see that they understand what the continental drift is and what that theory is. You can have them write a diary entry for a particular organ or a bone in the body, okay, like what happened today. And you could use that for multiple subjects. They can create a day in the life of a certain element, animal, planet, scientist. They can take the rock cycle. One of the things I would do is imagine you're a rock going through the rock cycle. You're going to write a short fictional story that tells what happens at each of the phases, and you have to make sure I understand that you understand each of these phases. Or imagine you're an animal that's living in a different biome than your own and talk about the adaptation. So there's lots of things that you can go with. You don't always have to write. Some of these could be discussion, okay? So you don't have to always sit down and write. Math, they could create a detailed city, much like the roller coaster. this super detailed city with certain parameters, and then when they're done, putting all this effort in, now give me the area, the perimeter of these certain buildings. So things that they can, and it can be 3D or flat, a math-based board game. They can do that in any subject, a board game. I know I've done it in the past, and I've told them, look, whoever has the best board game, we're gonna actually use your board game in all the classes, and we're going, like I would have them do it on big butcher paper, and we're gonna use your board game, and we're gonna use that for our review for our test. So that's something I love to do, like during the milestone review time, so that they can they get to create it, and if theirs is the best one, they get to have theirs used in every class. Writing word problems, and then trading them for people to solve and say, hey, whoever has the best one, I'm gonna put it on the test. So, creating comic strips, and you can do this for any subject, comic strip, presentation, or video to describe how something happens. And then just, they can use like blocks to build like 3D towers, and then measure height, width, angles, all that stuff. Language arts, writing an alternate ending to a story, ensuring that there's a new conclusion that aligns with the characters. After reading a book, create a fully developed new character who would fit into the story, and tell how they would fit into it. Study the works of a poet, and then write the poem in his or her style. Redesigning the cover of your favorite book. They can read a classic story and then choose a scene and rewrite it in current day, or discuss it like it was happening in modern times, okay? Social studies, writing a discussion that could have taken place before a particular battle, paying attention to key concepts and ideas that actually occurred. So what discussion might have happened between these particular people. Create a dialogue between people. You can do this with composers, you can do this with all kinds of things. Create a dialogue between two people, two artists, whatever. Imagine a conversation that could have occurred if they had encountered each other. So what might they have discussed? Create a documentary to discuss a particular historical event. Write a fictional diary entry from the perspective of a historical figure on a significant day in history. And then connections, which you guys are connections, so here we go. And I just came up with different ones for different. The first one, paint clay pots with the plant safe paint. That's a tongue twister. To sell during the annual plant sale. So like if these kids painted these pots, and then they told their parent, hey, you gotta come to the plant sale because you gotta buy my pot. So just things that they can still show that creativity. Rewriting the last two measures of a song for your instrument or your voice. Adding your own musical ideas. So take these last two measures and what would be your alternate ending to that? Combining the rules of two sports to create a new sport that students would enjoy. Creating a piece of art to mimic the style of a specific artist. Use computer coding to develop original digital art and animations. Write a short skit in French and perform it in front of the class. So these are all just like I'm spitballing things, but there's so many things that you can do, and it doesn't have to take time. Or you can take something that you were already wanting them to accomplish. Sometimes we think, okay, what do I want them to accomplish? I need them to understand this. And sometimes it's just, I want them to just enjoy their instrument more. I want them to know that they can go beyond what's on a piece of paper. And so sometimes it's just, I want them to develop this art. I want them to understand this artist and then create this art in that style. Whatever your goal is, take that goal and then think, what can I do to add the creative element? Are you gonna have creativity added to every assignment? No, and that's fine. Like, it's fine. Sometimes we do direct instruction, sometimes I do independent work. It's okay to mix that up, but don't be afraid to add that in. And sometimes it's just, take one lesson that you like and just develop it like fully and just like have full buy-in and try that one and go with it and then see how that works and kind of go from there. It's easier to start small and kind of build into it. And then also I like to, after I've done something new, I like to take a class that I trust that will give me like good feedback and not just like, and most kids will give you and just say, hey, tell me, what did you like? What did you not like? Okay. What do you think I could do better? Okay. Also, this is something really great at the end of the year. If you want to try something, then take your students at the end of the year and say, listen, this is something I think I want to do in the future. You're going to be my guinea pigs, and you guys can give me feedback, and you can offer them a reward. If you do this, then, or you can just say, sometimes it's just like, I'll give you a piece of candy if you just give me feedback. They'll do so much for a tiny piece of candy. Like so anyway, but just don't be afraid to add those creative things in. And these are just the references that I use. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Well, thank you guys so much for coming. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast and keep you too long, but I really appreciate it. So
That's great.
thanks.
That's a good reminder.